Okay, this is part two. In some ways this is about face, in that in part one I showed you the end user search interface fully populated. What I'm going to show you here is a completely empty system with no data at all in it. The reason for doing it this way around is obviously the front end part is the part that users see, that's the really important stuff. This is more procedural, this is about how it works back office. So I'm going to try and talk you through how we go from a reasonably empty system. I have actually preloaded a few data sets. I've preloaded the IPSV, the Integrated Public Service vocabulary, and I've also preloaded a list of library authorities. When the system's set up initially, there's only one user, a user called admin, and my current thinking, although this is flexible, is that we'll get people in local authorities to register themselves. One of the challenges here, I imagine, is how do we coordinate a national network of people? Obviously it's going to be quite difficult to get this catalogue of users or this directory of users set up, but I think there's quite a lot of opportunities once we do get that set up to do lots of different things. Once there's a national directory that we can be certain that people logging onto it have got certain permissions, we can do things like maintain the local library record in Find a Library. All those services, I think that there's a great potential here to build other services around this once we've got a trusted federated authentication service. So my thinking, although we can be flexible about this, it's easy to change, is that a user from a local authority will come here and create an account. They get an email when they create an account which says thank you for registering, click here to approve your account, so we can confirm that the email that they use is a genuine email, is their genuine email. And of course that's really useful because most people working in libraries have gov.uk email addresses, which gives us some idea about the authenticity of the request. I'm going to not do the registration step because it would involve me showing you the emails and things like that. It's quite time consuming, but I will show you what happens. So I'm going to log in as the admin user. This is the user front page when there are no organizations and no collections. And the way that this works is a user, once they've been approved, so they've signed up, they've confirmed their email address, you as an authority have approved the actual account. They come to this screen where they've got no affiliation with any organization. So the idea is that a user will first have to request an affiliation. The reason that I've preloaded the library authority data is that you need to affiliate with an organisation. So I'm going to affiliate with Sheffield, obviously. We should be able to find, all the authorities here. We can extend this list. I think this is the list of public library authorities that I've downloaded. But if there are different lists, they're easy to load. So Sheffield, I said, didn't I? So I'm going to say I'd like to be affiliated with Sheffield Library Authority, and the role that I'd like is an administrator. And my idea here is that the Society of Chief Librarians will put somebody on the case of approving an administrator in each local authority, but then the administrator in that local authority can take care of approving requests for that authority. So it's like you nominate one person in each authority to look after the other accounts, and then when other users in Sheffield register, that user will see those requests and be able to approve or reject them, which means you're kind of devolving the administration and the control of this out to the individual libraries, which means you don't have a fat overhead centrally to maintain this database. I think that devolved or federated authentication thing is quite useful. So a general user will request an affiliation with an organisation and a role. And we can see on the users page here we've got Organisation Sheffield status administrator pending approval. The system administrator, or indeed the organisational administrator, has access to this admin menu, and you can approve affiliations. I go in there and I can see that there's a pending affiliation from Sheffield requested administrator, and I can just approve it. When I go back to my home page, I now see that Sheffield has an administrator approved role. So this is good. This means I'm now connected with Sheffield, and I can be connected with multiple authorities, which might be useful for some people working at a national level. I click on Sheffield, and I get through to the Sheffield authority homepage. The idea is that local authorities may maintain multiple collections. The purpose of this piece of software isn't just libraries data. We believe that this could be used for things like family service databases, health and social care. There are many collections that you could maintain at a local level. Open Data Sheffield, for example, is involved with Ageing Well, and also we've got some members of the community who are involved with the Allotment Society. If you think about health, for example, there's a lot more to health than just health services. And if we can get people active, then we take the burden off the health service. So engaging with people like things like allotments is really useful. But the problem is the library can't maintain all that data. So by creating an environment where different people can manage different collections, we're trying to create a central place that can harvest the information and make it searchable without the administrative overhead. I should also say this system is capable of operating in two modes. A kind of managed mode where a collection is hosted here and managed, actively edited in this collection, and a hosting mode where we just import data and make it searchable. So the collections mechanism also works there. So we might have hosted collections like this digital access to information and services collection, but we might also have hosted collections we've brought in from other places just to make it searchable in a central location. I happen to know, well, so we've got Sheffield here with no collections. I happen to know that Sheffield Libraries maintains the Help Yourself database. You can Google it. In fact, I'll do that in a second. Help Yourself is a database, a citizens information database. There's lots of useful health resources. That's the database that you saw me searching in the previous screencast. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've made my user, the administrator has said, yes, you can be an administrator for Sheffield, and as that administrator, I'm creating a new collection called Help Yourself. So there we go, and I've done that, and that doesn't need to be approved because I'm already an administrator for Sheffield. And I can go into the collection, and you can see that I get taken to a search screen, and currently there are no records in this collection. So I've got two choices. I can just start filling out new entries in this directory. And these are the kinds of records that you saw in the search end, the front end that I demonstrated. A few other things that I just want to say. On the system admin menu, we've got other things like load vocabularies, and this is where I load things like the IPSV, the Integrated Public Service Vocabulary. If we're going to have a nationwide database of things like health resources, it makes sense to try and coordinate them as much as we can. And IPSV, for all its faults, is actually a useful place to do that. So I'm going to go back to my collections, Sheffield Help Yourself. I could manually start adding these, but the other thing I wanted to talk about here is the API part of this and engagement with the community. There's a massive appetite at the moment on the part of people on the ground to engage with data services, and there's some real skill out there. Just this weekend there have been Hack the Government events in Leeds, Bristol, I think, Exeter and London. I think I might have missed one there. Those are events where people can do short-term projects to get loads of data in there. If I just quickly Google for Sheffield Help Yourself, you'll see that this is the Help Yourself database maintained by Sheffield. The data, it's good data in here. It's not particularly searchable, it's not particularly usable or accessible, in my opinion. That's not to do it down. A lot of time and effort goes into maintaining this. But we can't reuse the data. We can't make it searchable in the map way that you saw in the first part. We can't search by postcode. There's no faceting. We actually got into this data set because we wanted to build a mobile app for it, and we couldn't get hold of the data. Open Data Sheffield, what we've done is we've written a scraper to try and get hold of this information so that we can repurpose it. And it's entirely possible that through all the library authorities in the UK we could do this. We could get data out of local institutional silos into a national service like the one that's proposed, and we could get it. We could save libraries a lot of money on those expensive systems that they pay for to maintain this data. You know, the open directories, open objects, for example, that local authorities use at great expense. So, just to prove the point there, we have an API for submitting data as well, and I've written this scraper. I've scraped data out of Help Yourself, and what I'm going to do is I've written a script which will take the data that we've scraped and automatically ingest it. So this is like a data migration project, if you like. If Sheffield wanted to use this platform to manage that data, or if they just wanted to periodically refresh it, push data in, they could use this API rather than the interface. So the API is authenticated. You can see I'm getting these record uploaded messages. And if I go back to our search interface now, if I refresh this, okay, you'll see that records are now flowing in. I've got 1 to 10 of 50, and if I refresh it again, 1 to 10 of 74, refresh it again, 1 to 10 of 99. So you can see that records are starting to flow in. So this is a bulk data load, if you like, and this could be done for any local authority that wishes to do it. We worked very hard with Sheffield in particular to get permission to use this data set and with the local authority. So one of the other things I think that's quite strong about our bid is that we know how to talk to local authorities and local libraries to try and negotiate access to data, because sometimes that can be quite a minefield, and so we've got some real expertise there. So what I've done is, rather than manually creating the records, I've given us a leg up, in essence. And let's have a quick look at the first record there, the climbing work. So you can see this is the details screen. When I clicked on new record, you saw it was quite a sparse screen. Once you've got the rough details in, the title and the description, and you save that record, then you can start attaching other things to it. And you can see that we've got in here things like the title, the description. These are things which appear on the interface, the primary URL. We've got a status, so we make things current by default. We could flag them as pending review, so that when we bulk data load records, somebody in the library has to look at them and set them to be current, just in case you want to do some data cleaning or some data validation. We could also set the status to needs review after a year, for example. We could look at the last modified date. So there's lots of things we can do in terms of workflow. And bear in mind, this doesn't have to be SCL. This could be the local library doing this. So there's a way of devolving the effort of maintaining these kinds of records down to the lowest level. Here I've got the tie level information, and then I've got some contact details here. On the details screen, I've got a number of things. So collections. A record can be in multiple collections, and the reason for this is relatively straightforward. If we bulk data load records from local authorities, what that authority might like to do, or what we might like to do, is to set a PLEO collection up, which is records that have been nominated from the local set to go forward to a national set. Now when we do that, what we can do is we can add this record into that national collection, and we're not maintaining two records. All we're doing is we're saying this record we'd like to be in the national collection. We can transparently filter that search so that we only see certain collections or certain aggregations of records. So this is a way of reusing work, good work that local libraries have already done in the context of maybe a national health service. The local libraries go through their existing set of records and they promote certain ones up to the national collection. Or we can just search everything, but again I'm trying to get across this idea that there's some flexibility in the information architecture. There are some choices to be made, but I think that we've got a system here that will support the decisions we can all make once we get around the table and we start talking about what's going to work best. Other things I need to point to, subjects. When we've imported these records, subjects which I've spotted a correspondence with IPSV have actually been migrated. So abseiling, as it turns out, is a term in the IPSV. So rather than have a local only term, what I've done is I've actually mapped abseiling here to the IPSV, and similarly with climbing. Coaching isn't a term in the IPSV, and so that's just added as a local subject heading. If we were later on to add IPSV, coaching to IPSV, then we could migrate it. But this gives us a way of doing some kind of subject-based navigation. We could very easily introduce a category list, put some pretty icons in there for climbing, which would let us search in different ways. And that's relatively easy to do on the front end once we've got this structure at the back end. We also have categories. This was more a hangover from the way that the data was. I didn't really want to lose these categories. If you remembered when I looked at Help Yourself, the front page had a big grid of about 15 things on it. I believe that category is the thing which drives that. It seemed like a useful thing to use. Again, where a category maps to an IPSV term, we actually map to the IPSV term instead. just to try and give us some commonality so that we could load data sets from everywhere, from Greater London, from Bristol, Exeter, the IPSV, where there is correspondence in the terms. That would give us, a way to look at all the sport records in the UK, which would be an incredibly powerful thing, I think. Without doing any work, we're just saying, actually, this looks like the same term. Let's use the same common thing. And where they aren't in IPSB, we retain them, but we just retain them as a local keyword. So that's details in terms of collections, subjects, and categories. Next up, we've got sessions. I spoke in the first part about the importance of locating things in time and place. So this is where we can say where activities occur. Records here are about actual events users can go to. It's different to the administrative address for an organisation. This is the place where things actually happen, so that when users search postcodes, they don't find the head office of something, which might be the guy living next door to them, but no activity takes place there. When we've got something under the sessions task, we're recording events and places where activity actually takes place. You can say that we can set description, start time, end time. The text recurrence is a way of saying, so this is the existing one, this is where we can add new sessions, and I'll very quickly just show you here. Commonly in records, it's very difficult to figure out from this text that this activity happens on Monday to Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's difficult to compute that, but I can say things like every weekday. And you can see that to the right here, this has come back, and this is something called an iCal string. When this appears to the right, what it means is that the system understands the free text you've put in here. This is important. We can use this data to generate things like calendar entries. So we'd like this database to be the catalogue, if you like, of activity. So we don't want in this database to have Monday the 25th, this activity. But there are databases in local authorities like activity databases. There's a thing called Event Sheffield in Sheffield, for example. We can use this database to build entries into those systems so that when people look at their mobile phones and they say, can you tell me what's happening near me tonight? We can actually answer that query, and we can give them a list, and we can say, at 5 p.m. tonight, there's an event at the Climbing Works. It's £2.50, children are welcome. We're starting to build an information ecosystem that will really support some innovation. It's not just like the boring old systems that we used to have. We're actually trying to engage with citizens on the devices that they've got. And this kind of metadata is critical for that kind of application. So whilst this system will work with minimal metadata, title, description and postcode, if we can encourage people to take the time to fill this information out, we could build some really neat things. So what I hope this system does is to support very low barrier to entry, minimal metadata to support the sort of systems we want, but actually give us the opportunity to support some of those more interesting things. In this context as well, we need to think about what I alluded to in the first screencast, the idea that we might get a person from the Climbing Works, authenticate them in that front-end system and get them to suggest more details, so that rather than the librarian having to pick up the phone and say, can you tell me what dates and what your prices are, we can actually engage people at the lowest level, and when they change their prices they can log on, say our price has changed. The librarian will come through to this screen, and then you'll see something at the top that says user such and such says that the price has changed from this to this. Do you want to accept it? You just click yes, or they've added a session, they've removed a session, you just click yes to approve it. And we really start and make this process of maintaining this data as frictionless as we possibly can. And alright, the Climbing Works is a poor example, but for HIV support sessions, which run 8 till 9 p.m. on Tuesdays, that sort of thing is really useful. And it's also really useful for the users in terms of getting the information they need without having to come back and ask, or without having to pick up the phone. If they can see that a particular support session is at a particular time at a particular venue, they can just turn up. It's frictionless, and some of the barriers to access might have been removed because we can just get people in amongst the people they really want to meet without having to deal with the intermediaries, which in some parts of health is quite important, I feel. The last tab here is registrations. Some of the entries have registered charity numbers. If we look at things like childcare, there are Ofsted reports. So this is a section where we can add properties if you want to be able to store registration information about activities. this is all really extensible. There's no particular limit on what fields we can add here. We just need to know what you want to record. Obviously, there's a trade-off between usability and information richness. You don't want to collect too much. As I said, this system works really well with minimal data. It's just that the richer you make the information, the better experience your end users get. And unfortunately, that's a trade-off that we have to sit down at a table and discuss where to draw that line. So that is the record editing in essence. So what I've got is, I think that's finished loading now. Yeah, so Help Yourself, the version we've scraped, has 4,184 records. That means that this service can hit the ground running with that search interface that I showed you at the start. It took about a day to write the screen scraper to get the Help Yourself data set into here. So we're looking about a day's activity. And maybe we could find people in local authorities, for our initial target areas who would write a scraper, or we could just spend some of the days we've got available from the project to do that. But I think that hitting the ground running is a really valuable thing, because it means that we can very quickly get to the stage where end users can look at an interface and tell us what they think of it. And we end up spending time making the system right rather than developing the system from scratch, which is a real strength of this bit, I think. Just to show you the way that this works, I could search in description for HIV, and I'll see the HIV. So this is more like the librarian end user, the librarian interface, and it's the one that you can use for managing the data sets. You can page through these records using this navigation. The other thing I can do is, if I just look at some parts of this interface do need a little bit of cleaning up, but I can switch on this quick view link, and if I go back now, give that a reload, you can see that I've added this column with view, which gives you a more kind of email type of interface. So I can page through the libraries, I can go back, or I could see this in a quick view, which gives me this side-by-side view. It's kind of easier to work with in some respects, because administratively you might be looking for a very specific record. I might want to update something, to change a telephone number, or to change a average price, something like that. I think that's all I need to say about this. I guess it's worth saying as well, the system is split very cleanly into this administrative application and the search application, and that's really useful because it means we can take down the administrative system but leave the front-end search system up, and we can do maintenance in different ways. And that's quite important for public information services, where we want the uptime. We can focus on the search interface and do whatever modifications we need to this back-end system. We can bulk load things like addresses, and we can bulk load things like vocabularies and user lists and organization lists. That can all be done through this administrative menu. That's pretty much it. Feels like there should be more to show, but that's it. What happens is, after you edit records here, they go into a public interface. So there's an open data interface which the search interface then uses to pull those changes through and index them. So there's this clean separation. It's called separation of concerns, and it gives us a really nice architecture for building other systems on top of. If at some point I really feel like I need to force a re-update, for some reason something's gone wrong with the data, I've had to take it down in the front interface, I can also do things like force index update. Force enrichment is a tool which will read through all the records and try and do things like keyword extraction and spatial extraction. So we've got some tools, and we can enrich the data in whatever way we need to. That's it. Yeah, we've got some APIs as well, open data things, ways of getting records in, but I think that's all you need to see in this screencast. Feel free to email questions though. Okay, thanks.